Okay. Yep.
Okay, good morning. So today I will present you this paper which tries to answer to the question and why the Italian school system, which is centralized, publicly financed and egalitarian both in the cost and the quality of education provided, does not even achieve the same level of intergenerational mobility than the United States, which is instead a very decentralized and privately financed school system. And why is intergenerational mobility so important? Well, because people have talent. And so the major risk of an immobile society is that high talented people might be assigned to low education groups, while low talented people may be assigned to high education groups. So the major objective of this paper is try to find the institutional setup for schooling which is more suited for ensuring a more mobile society. In doing so, we will analyze two different definitions of intergenerational mobility, which are occupational mobility and educational mobility. Occupational mobility is defined as mobility between occupations, and occupations are ranked according to the median income paid by each occupation, while educational mobility is instead defined as the probability of achieving the highest level of educational degree which is offered by each country. And the highest educational level in the United States is considered the college degree in this paper, which corresponds to the Italian laurea magistrale. So let's first look at some evidence on these 2 points. First of all, about occupational mobility, we have these two transition matrices. These two transition matrices have to be interpreted in the following way. They basically give us the probabilities of transiting from one occupational or income class to another. So we have 4 different classes. And what can we see from these two transition matrices is that the probability of staying in the first lower class is higher in the US than in Italy, because we have 25.9% in the US and 21.8% in Italy. And this might be due to the fact that ghettos have a very high importance in the United States. Besides this result, all the other elements along the main diagonal are higher in Italy, are greater in Italy than in the US. These witnessing the fact that there is less occupational mobility in Italy than in the US. On the other hand, for what concerns evidence on educational mobility, we have 2 different education groups, Education 1 and Education 2. Education 1 is the group of people that do not hold a college degree, while Education 2 is the group of people holding a college degree. And what is the evidence about this? The evidence is that the probability for the son of a graduate to be graduate actually is higher in Italy than in the US, while the probability that the son of a non-graduate will be graduate is lower in Italy than in the US. And so this result shows that the family background is much more important in Italy than in the US. So we can now start with the model. The model has some basic assumptions. First of all, people live for only 2 periods and are productive only in the second. And the productive power of each person depends on his human capital. And so human capital also determines the wage that each people is gonna earn. And the total human capital is given by the above integral, where G of t is the distribution function of human capital. We have a basic working ability normalized to 1, and beside this, the critical element for accumulating capital is talent. Talent can be of 2 types. It can be high or low, and we talk about types because talent is unobservable, and so people can only form beliefs on talent talent, which are denoted by B of T. And the only test for talent is performance at school. So basically, if a person goes to school and succeeds, then he has talent. Otherwise, he doesn't have talent. So talent is transmitted from father to son with some persistency, and a degree of a measure of persistency is given by 1 minus alpha, while a measure of non-persistency is given by alpha. What does this mean? This means that 1 minus alpha is the probability for the son to be high talented if the father was high talented, or for the son to be low talented if the father was low talented. And alpha instead is the probability of being different from the father. So it is the probability that the son is high talented when actually the father was low talented. We also have a Cobb-Douglas production function whose parameters are very important because they will be used for comparative statics later on. So we have theta, which is a scale parameter, n, which is leisure enjoyed, and E of t, which is the quality of education. And the quality of education does depend on the institutional setup for schooling, because in a private school system, the quality for education is decided by parents, while in a public school system, parents only vote for a tax, which, if applied to the total income, give you the total expenditure, as you can see from this formula here. And the tax is voted in each period and is decided according to the majority rule. Let's look at the timing of this model. So basically we have two periods, period t and period t plus 1. A person born at time t can only observe the family background, so can only observe the history of successes and failure of his own family, and can form beliefs looking at these personal background. He can form beliefs on his own talent. And he can then decide whether or not to go to school. So if he decides to go to school, which is denoted by Y over here, he also have to choose the amount of effort to put in the learning activity, while the decision of not going to school is denoted by N. And this is the end of period 1. So in period 1 we have only one choice, one optimal choice, which is the choice between whether or not going to school. And this choice is taken without observing the personal talent. After we have the beginning of period t plus 1, at the beginning of period t plus 1, talent is revealed, and the parents decide on the degree of educational expenditure, or they vote for the tax in the state school system. And after that, we can have three different outcomes. If the person decided to go to school and he has been successful, then the personal belief over his own talent will be equal to 1, while the belief over the talent of his son will be equal to 1 minus alpha, where if the person has failed, then the beliefs will be respectively 0 and alpha. If the person did decide not to go to school, then he will gather no information about his own talent. So in this second part, we have a second optimal choice, which is the choice of the parents that decides on the amount of educational expenditure or on the tax to vote for, only after observing the talent of their son and the choice of their son between going or not going to school. So there is a clear asymmetry of information in this game. Let's look also at the typical history of a dynasty. So we know for sure that a dynasty will experience a failure at a certain point. After this failure, the son of the person who actually failed will have a belief over his own talent equal to alpha, which is the problem. The problem is that this alpha is way too low for letting letting him go back to school. So he basically have a too low self-confidence, so he won't go to school. And also the members, the subsequent members of the dynasty won't go to school. However, even if they don't go to school, they will update this belief over alpha in an increasing shape, and until that this alpha will reach a critical level, and the corresponding member of the dynasty will go to school once again. So the dynasty will enter a new period in which people go to school, they acquire a lot of human capital, and they spend, they devote a lot of their income for the educational expenditure of the children, or they vote for even high taxes. So we can say that a society is more mobile the lower the level of critical value needed for discourage the people of the dynasty to go back to school. And the most important result of this research is that the authors found that there are crucial differences between a private school system and a state school system in terms of this critical value. And these differences may be due to four major factors. The first one is transfer of resources, meaning that the presence of taxes transfer resources between low income from a high-income family to low-income family. Effective altruism means that in a private school system, the decision of going to school has a higher value because the person knows that if he goes to school and he will succeed, then his son will truly benefit from this success in terms of higher human capital and higher income. And also the information in a private school system has a higher value because if a person knows something about his own talent exposed in a state school system, well, this information will be useless because he cannot use these in order to change the tax rate because there is a unique tax rate. And finally, the rate of expenditure, meaning that in some cases it might happen that the parents want to pay a higher tax than the prevalent tax existing in the community. Why? Because the tax is unique and is decided by the median voter. So which of these four factors do prevail? In order to understand these, we will look at some comparative studies. In these comparative studies, we fix the values of alpha and theta, and we let beta and gamma change, thus creating two different scenarios. In the first scenario, beta has a higher value than gamma, while in the second one, gamma has a higher value than beta. And what are beta and gamma? Well, beta is the elasticity in the accumulation of human capital with respect to individual effort, while gamma is the elasticity in the accumulation of human capital with respect to the quality of education. You can see it if we go back to the production function. Just 1 second. Okay. Here is it. So you can see that beta is the elasticity in the accumulation of human capital with respect to individual effort, and gamma is over here, so it's the elasticity with respect to the quality of education. So with this in mind, we can see from these comparative studies that if in both scenarios, in both scenarios, the state system, the state school system has less inequality than the private school system. On the other hand, the total human capital is higher in the private school system, and also the total expenditure in education. The critical expenditure in education is instead higher in the state school system, and this might be due to the first factor, the transfer of resources. But the most important part of this table is the second part. Here we can see that basically when beta is higher than gamma, then the private school system performs better, while the opposite of true when gamma is greater than beta. So what does this mean? This means that when the individual effort are greater than the quality of education, then a state school system must be, a private school system must be preferred to a state school system. While when the individual effort does not matter that much with respect to the quality of education, then a state school system must be preferred. So the conclusion of this research is that the Italian school system does fail in achieving intergenerational mobility because it has designed an excessively centralized school system, especially with respect to the education, to the university level. And the university level of education is a level of education in which the individual effort is much more important than the quality of education. So this is not a failure of the state school system as a whole, but this is a failure only of Italy because it has to put less, to design a less centralized school system, especially at the university level. And instead, for instance, the Germany school system is a very centralized one, but it performs better in terms of intergenerational mobility than the US. This is because the German school system is highly selective, especially at the university level. So, yeah, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.